Now let's talk about something called function parameters and arguments. So by now we were using simple functions with empty parents, right? Now let's see this thing where I can also use a value here, any value, any name I can use here, and then I can pass a value which will be used by this name inside this function. You understand? So right now, if I call this function with 5, then val will be 5. And if I print value, then val will be 5. So you see that when I print, then value 5, it is there, right? So this is what I'm talking about. You can have it any variable. So let's say x, y, z. Then this will be x, y, z. Then same behavior, right? And here you can pass anything. You see 50. Not only that, you can pass one time 50, one time 100, 120 or something. You understand now? And every time whatever value you passed, that value is being used. Now this is powerful, and that's why functions are predominantly used, because these are the superpowers which are getting. Not only the code is shared and commonly used from multiple places, but they can be customized by passing these variables, which means that they will take those values. You understand? Now this is like very powerful. I can pass here world, right? And you see this value world will be printed. So whatever you pass here, that will, and naming can be anything. You can say this thing n, or any variable. So you are understanding that what is happening is that the value which you are passing here is assigned to this thing, okay, and that value is now available inside whatever value you are passing here. That value is available inside the body of the function, you with the name of that variable. As simple as that, right? Now let's see. Okay, and not only you can use this again. Earlier I told you that you can have another variable, let's say x is equal to 100, and then you can use that x also here, right? So something like this. So x is 100, and then I am passing 120. Then what will be printed? 100 plus 120, 220. See, 220 is printed. So this is simple. Now you can do something like this also, that let's say I have an increment by function. So you should name your functions accordingly, whatever is the behavior of that function that you should do. And right now for a change, I have used an arrow function. So you can use a normal function also, you can use an arrow function also. So we see that outside it is 100, and now the value which I am printing is 100 plus that. So you see that if I run this, then I get 102. Again, if I run this, then I get 105. Understand? So pretty simple. You can mix and match both the strategies, closure variables and arguments, both you can use. And what is this? What I used arguments. Now what is argument? You see that this thing which we are passing, they are called arguments, and the value in which it is getting passed, that is called a parameter. So you see, the function parameters are the names listed in function's definition. So whatever the name is listed here inside the function definition, those are called parameters. So this val here, val is a parameter. What are arguments? Arguments are the real values that are passed to the function, which means that this 2, 5, whatever actual value you pass, they are arguments. So in that sense you can understand that actually any particular value, primitive or non-primitive or literals, but generally these are values, right? This can be variables also. So let's say I have a variable, let a is equal to 20 or 10, right? And then I can pass a here. I can pass a here, and then it will be 120. Straightforward, right? But you can understand that it can be anything. But the body of the function uses the variables which are in the argument list. So those are called which are in the parameter list. So the parameters which are available inside this parents, right, they will be used only inside the body, and those parameters will take the value which are passed as arguments, which are the actual values which are passed when you are calling it. Okay, that is fine. Now we will have something called function return values. Now this is important because till now we were seeing something like only, yeah, something printing, we are just printing, but actually the power of the function comes by something called return values. So let's say we have something like this, let's say num 100 and then increment by this thing which we saw earlier, but rather than printing, let's do something like this. We write return and then this value. Okay, so what is happening here, you see that uh, essentially the syntax is something like this, that there is a keyword that you can understand that this is syntax highlighted in a different color, which means that this is like some JavaScript keyword. All the keywords like in this particular setup, you can see that let const and this is purple. So whatever is purple in like my VS Code, that thing is keyword. So you can understand this thing is purple, which means that this is a default JavaScript keyword. And that what that means is that from this function, please return the value which I am giving you after this. Okay, so after return, whatever the expression is written, what is expression is something which returns a value, which evaluates to something. Whatever this thing will evaluate to, that thing will be returned. So you can understand that you can put a bracket also here, but that is not needed because any expression which is written after their return, that will be evaluated and that is returned. Now you see that what is the difference. Earlier when I was doing something like increment by 5, then 105 was printing. Now nothing is happening. Why? Because you know what, earlier this thing was here some console log this value was happening, and that's why it was printing. But right now I am not saying that print, I am saying that just give me that value, and whenever you return that value is given by this, and that can be captured by another variable. So let's say abc is another variable, or let's say new num, let's give a proper name. Let's say new num is a new variable, right? And let's get into this habit where we don't need we don't need to modify this, then change it to const. Okay, because we are not modifying it directly anywhere. Now you see that 100 plus val, whatever val 5 is passed, then 100 plus 5, 105 is returned, but that is not, we did not do anything with that value. That value 100 plus 5, 105 is returned, and now that 105 is the value of this expression. So if you see that every time I'm saying that any expression, so you can understand that this thing is an expression sort of, and this returns a value, any expression. So if I write, let's say const xyz is equal to 10 plus 5, you understand, then what happens, this 10 plus 5, whatever expressions answer is there, that is assigned to 15. Similarly, the value of increment by, and this thing is assigned to, and whatever, and what this thing is evaluating to, this thing is evaluating to actually whatever is you are returning from inside. Long way of saying that now if you print new num, then what will happen, straight 105 will be printed. Okay, so it should be now fairly clear. Okay, so let's see a couple of more things. First thing is that you can pass anything, you can return anything, but even if you don't return anything from a JavaScript function, it always returns something. You understand? So let's say I don't return this. Then what do you think will happen? I did not return anything. let's properly delete it, right? I did not return anything. Okay, then what will be assigned to new num? You see, when you run it, you will see undefined. So when when we are not returning anything, then never say that this function is not returning anything. Never say like this. You have not returned anything. The function, any function in JavaScript always returns something. Now, if you return something explicitly, then that value is returned from the function. That is fine. If you don't return anything, then by default undefined is returned. Undefined we earlier saw, right? It is a separate data type with a value called undefined. Now that undefined value is returned. Now you see that it does not matter that what I do with the other value. So let's say rather than return, I have not returned anything, okay, and I have let's say printed this console logged this, right? What should happen now? See, 105 will be printed because that is what this function is doing. It is printing 105. But the earlier I was just just writing this thing, and that's why only those numbers were printed. Now you see that I have assigned that value to a variable and then printed this. Now this thing is undefined. So as I said that if you return anything, say let's say I return 5, then if I whatever I return, that value will be coming here. So you see that 105 and 5. I can return anything, let's say Ola, okay, and any string I'm returning, that string will come here. So as soon as I'm returning something, then it is coming here. If I don't return something, then it will be undefined. That is the first thing we saw. Second thing is that let's say you simply wrote return and you did not do anything, you simply wrote return, then also undefined is returned. So if you don't return anything, if you return 1, then 1 will be returned. But if you don't return anything, which means that either you don't write it or you write it but don't return it, then also undefined will be returned. You see, that is the first thing. Okay, third thing we can do is that we can specifically return undefined. In this case also undefined will be returned. In this case properly we are. However, we could return another values, like null is a proper value, so I could return null. But again, if I don't return anything or I properly return undefined, both are exactly same. You can see the same thing. Now that is fine. The second thing is that any code in the function which is written after the return statement is not executed. Okay, which means that yeah, I have written, let's say here let's say some hello, that is fine. But after that, let's say I am again printing let's say hello world. Understand? See what is happening. First of all, VS Code is suggesting you that this thing is slightly dull, slightly dull color. You see why? You see, if you don't write this, then this thing becomes bright. But if you write a return statement, this becomes dull. Actually, that is the way of saying the VS Code to you that you are doing this sort of mistake. Actually, this thing is useless. Why it is useless? Because in a function, when you see return, then you return, you jump outside that function. Now nothing after that line will be executed, and that's why this line is useless. This line will do nothing. You can understand that obviously 105 is printed here, and then hello I returned, and that hello is printed here, but after that, see, nothing has happened. So anything which you want to do, you have to do it above or before the whatever return statement, right? So if you do now, then you see that this hello world is printed, 105 is printed, and this, which means that if you want to return, then it does not make sense to write anything after return, and that's why generally you will always write return as the last line of the body of the function. Okay, so generally you should write return as the last statement in the function. Okay, now we see something called multiple parameters, which means that till now we are seeing just one value. Okay, yeah, So val, but you know what, I can pass here let's say another val 2. Okay, and I can add that also, you see, val 2. Now that what will happen, let's clear this up, this is not needed, and let's properly return this value rather than returning something else. So let's return this value only. Now you see that 5 and 10, let's say. So what is happening? 100 plus 5 plus 10, 115. You see? So it is as simple as that. All the values which you are passing, that is coming here. Now there are some small caveats here. Let's print the value of val1 and val2 here. Okay, so val and val2. Let's print it here. So for now, let's not return anything. Let's not print this also for now. So 510, and I just wanted to show you that 510 is passed. Okay, I wanted to print this to show you something, that let's say you remove 10. See, it is expecting two values, but you are passing just one value. What will happen? Again, you see, undefined. So undefined, you understand that it is coming in many and many cases, right? If you don't define anything, just say let a, then also it is undefined. If you don't return anything, then by default undefined is returned. If something is expected to have some value but you did not give it in function parameters, that is also undefined. You understand? So undefined in that sense always behaving like that something which is not initialized in some sense, and that value is undefined. Okay, fine. Why I commented everything else, and just one more thing, and if you don't pass let's say 5 also, then what will happen? See, that is also undefined. Okay, that is the thing. So if you pass let's say 10, then obviously 10 is printed. If you pass let's say 230, then the second value is now not undefined, it is proper 230, right? What if you pass more things? Let's say 500, I pass third argument. The only two parameters are there, but I am passing three arguments. What will happen? You see, nothing will happen. Why? Because it has this function has ignored your third argument. You know what? Because this function and JavaScript is very much flexible in that case, that it will not throw you errors. Other programming languages properly want these things, and that exactly whatever is matching, you should pass exactly that number. It should not be less, it should not be more. In this, and there are ways to do in other programming languages these things, but by default the behavior in JavaScript is that if you don't pass some value, then that value will be passed as undefined. If you pass more values, then the extra values will be discarded. They will not be used. Just whatever is needed, that will be used, right? That is the first thing. Next thing I wanted to discuss is that, okay, I intentionally commented these things. You see, I intentionally commented these things. Why? Because let's start with just one value. Let's start with one value. So val and here just val. Okay, and I pass let's say 10. Okay, then obviously 10 is printed, and if I uncomment this and then print this value, then obviously 110 will be printed. Okay, next thing is that let's say I don't pass 10 here. Then, as we discussed, this value which we did not pass, but it is expecting, so it will be undefined. Console log, obviously when we do console log, it will be undefined. But what will happen if I return something like this? What do you think? So 100 plus undefined, what will happen? So which means that here if I print, what will happen? You see that something called NaN is happening. So this undefined is printed, and then this thing is NaN printed, which proves the point that if I do something like 100 plus undefined. Now again, these are like weird things which you should never do. But why I'm mentioning these things, because sometimes unintentionally these things will happen. Okay, and if you know that 100 plus undefined, any number added to undefined will be not a number, then if something not a number comes, then you know that okay, you have done some mistake somewhere, right? So that's why I'm mentioning these things. You obviously you should never do something like this, but if something like now again, once it is not a number, then after that you add any number, again it will keep on being not a number. Okay, okay, that is fine. What I was saying is that what will happen if there is val2, and then let's print that val2, that is fine, and then I use val plus val2. Okay, and then here I pass, let's say 10 20. Here is it is straightforward. 10 20 will be printed, and then 30, whatever is the value, that is added to 130. Now if I don't use this second argument, then val will be undefined. Then what will be printed actually? You see, not a number is printed. Why? Because the val2 was undefined, and now in this expression what are we doing? We are doing 100 plus 10 plus undefined. So 100 plus 10 plus whatever, 100 plus 10 was 110, but ultimately we added it to undefined. Undefined, if we add to a number, then that is not a number. Okay, and that's why nan came. Just one trivia, any number, that is fine, plus undefined is not a number, that we know, but any number plus null, this is 0. See, null is being treated as 0. 3455. So just take a simple number, let's say 50. So you see, the first one was not a number, but second one is 50. So null is treated as 0, but undefined is not treated as 0, right? Similarly, if I do something like null plus false, then in this context false will be treated as 0, and that's why 50. However, if I do something like 50 plus true, we already discussed this thing, this will be treated as 1, and that's why it will be 51. Just a small thing, because something like this thing we earlier saw, but just to mention you that something plus null, then it will be treated as 0, and something plus undefined. Now again, everything is related to number. Let's say that you don't have a number, you have a string, let's say this 50, or let's say whatever, hello, let's say 50 only, 50, but this 50 is not a number, is a string. Now what will happen? You see, undefined is now not added, and null, not a number, it's not like that, not a number. Now everything is trying to be converted to string. So 50 plus undefined, now it is being converted to 50 plus undefined, and this undefined is concatenated, like undefined is now treated as like string. You understand, like implicitly it has been converted to string and attached to 50. So that's why answer is 50 undefined. Similarly, null is converted to string and then attached in there. And actually false and true, they are also not behaving as 0 and 1 properly. They are like somehow internally converted to string and then attached to it. Why? Because one part of the string, this is sort of a priority. You can understand it like priority. If number is there and something else is there, then the other thing is being tried to be converted to number. But if a string is there and something else is there, then the other thing is being tried to be converted to string, and then plus means concatenate. So in that sense, this thing is happening. So we discussed that we can have arguments, and that can be multiple arguments. And then if we use something like this, then all the values which we are passing, so 3 will be assigned to the first, 5 will be assigned to the second, and then multiply 3 5, this will return 3 into 5 15. If you don't write console log, then simply call multiply 3 5, then 15 will be returned, but nothing will be printed on the screen because nothing has happened. You have not used that value is thrown away, you have not used that. So in order to print that, either you directly do like this, or have a separate variable, let xyz is equal to multiply 3 5 and then print xyz. That you can do, right? Again, you can have unlimited number of arguments. You can have like 3 4 5, whatever number of arguments you need. Again, when you call, then those arguments you have to provide. And we discussed that what happens if we don't pass values which are not there, if those values are not there, then they are treated as undefined. And if those values which are there, extra, let's say s1 s2 is only there, s3 is not there, then that will be discarded. That is the first thing. Okay, next we will discuss something called implicit return. So what happens is that, let's say there is a function, and let's say this function name is add, and let's say pq, whatever, pq, and then you are returning p plus q. Okay, and now let's say you are printing something like 3 and 5. What will happen? 3 5 is passed. Oh, sorry, 3 5 you have to add, you have to print the add 3 5. Yeah, so this thing will be evaluated to 8. Why? You can have a separate variable also. Let's say a, let a is equal to this and print a. Okay, what is happening? And let's have a const because we are not modifying it. Okay, so you understand that 3 5 is passed and 3 plus 5 is returned. A is 8, and when I print a, this is 8. Fair and simple, right? What if I convert this to an arrow function? So now it is like const, and then this thing is syntax of our arrow function is something like this. Okay, again same thing, 3 5 will be called, and this add, and this will be now exactly the same 8. Okay, I wanted to discuss something called implicit return. So in arrow function there is a shortcut for this thing. This thing can be written like this. This thing can be written like this. You understand? You don't need, if you don't use arrow functions. So you understand what has happened. See, this warning is because I am trying to redeclare it, but just if any one of them will be there, then that will work fine. Just firstly try to run this. This thing will also give you 8. And let me now show you that what it means. See, when you use a curly braces, then you have to use return. If you don't use return, then by default undefined will be returned. But if you are just returning some expression, and like it's a sort of a one-liner code, then rather than writing curly braces start, curly braces end, and then return, and then this expression, the shortcut, this sort of a syntactic sugar in JavaScript, is after arrow function. This is only applicable for arrow function. For normal that function keyword declaration, for that it does not apply. Only arrow function. If you simply give this expression, you can give it in bracket also, that is fine, but it should not be that bracket. You understand? It should not be this bracket, because this bracket means that it is start of the function, so it should not be like that. You can, this for normal grouping of expression, you can write that like this, or even if you don't like this, that is fine, because it understands that this is the expression you are talking about. This is called implicit return, which means that after arrow function, if curly braces is not there, simply expression is there, that expression is treated as the return value. You understand that this expression, it will be treated that it has a body with return this expression. Understand? So now you understand that what is happening. If I write here, just for simplicity, let's say I write here hello. Just I am just not using pq. Just it means that you are returning hello. You understand? So if I comment this, because I cannot redeclare it, but if right now I will print, then you see that hello is printed. Whatever I do here, and let's say I do like p p or let's say q divided by p, q divided by p. Understand? It is a simple expression, right? A simple expression. But what will happen? 3, 5 will be passed, and 5 divided by 3, that will be passed, and then 5 divided by 3, whatever the answer that is coming here. Now you should be fairly clear that what do we mean by implicit returns. Whenever you see something like this syntax, don't get confused. It is just a shortcut for this sort of syntax. So in this case, it is shortcut for return properly this expression q by p, and you take here and just, right, this thing will also behave exactly like this. So you can see that this thing will also give the same answer. So this is called implicit return. Okay, we'll see some more topics in the next video.